friends, welcome. Friends, you all know that on 8th of May, there was an article which was published in Indian Express and many other English dailies and other dailies that Starlink received government clearance to offer internet services, right? After a long period of time, this clearance was given. And then just a day after, on 9th of May 2025, TRAI came out with their recommendation. This was a long-awaited recommendation because the consultation was going on for a long period of time. And they were, I don't know why they are waiting. Maybe they were waiting for Starlink to get a clearance. Now they came out with this recommendation. Now, friends, the reason I'm doing this video is two purposes. One, I want to take you through the recommendations of TRAI. How the recommendation is going to impact or facilitate the satellite service providers in India. So I'm going to talk about the nuances, not drill down to minute levels, but on a high level, so that people who are watching this video will understand that how the satellite services are going to be impacted in India based on the TRAI recommendation, because TRAI recommendation is pretty important. What happened before TRAI recommendation is only the license, and license is different. And TRAI recommendation is different because it is talking about spectrum assignment and spectrum charges and how spectrum needs to be managed and how it should be assigned to the satellite service provider for different type of satellite services. And therefore, this recommendation is pretty important, right? Then we are going to pick one particular player, which is the most important player, Starlink, and then evaluate and analyze the impact of the TRAI recommendation from a financial point of view on Starlink, which is going to be very, very interesting. So just be with me in this video and you will learn a lot and you will understand what is going on as regards satellite services are concerned. Okay. So let's go straight to the TRAI recommendation. Now, friends, in this recommendation, it is actually a 203-page document. Lot of documents and lot of past history and references, etc. have been attached, but we will just cut the clutter and we'll go straight to the meat of this recommendation. Now, before I take you through the summary of the recommendation, I would like to tell you that when you talk about satellite services, there are different types of satellite services. Different type of satellite services have been named differently, right? We don't have to go into the nomenclature. Like VSAT, then you can say that there is a word called NGSO, then we have GSO, and then we have got MSS, FSS. People will get confused. So rather than going into these nomenclatures, I will go into the overall theme which anchors these services. And that is what is important for you. So the first, service, which is called geocentric satellite services, GSO. GSO can be used to give different type of satellite services, internet services, voice services. So we are not going to talk about that. We are going to talk about the placement of the satellite and what specifically it does and how the footprint of the satellite kind of is spread over the surface of the Earth. Now, GSO means a satellite which is orbiting synchronous to the rotation of the Earth. And therefore, it has to be at a height of 36,000 kilometers. If it is not there at the height of 36,000 kilometers, then the satellite and the rotation of the Earth is not going to be synchronous. It is stationary on the surface of the Earth. That is what GSO is, right? All satellite services earlier were GSO. NGSO means non-geostationary satellite. And these services were recent phenomena. It was not there earlier, right? So what ITU did is they came out with a sharing criteria. Same frequencies which are being used by GSO are now shared with NGSO with certain kind of threshold power, transmission, you can say that restriction, so that the sharing is possible. And these guidelines are laid out by ITU. And we don't have to go into those guidelines. What I want to tell you is that GSO and NGSO satellites can share the same spectrum. Now, NGSO is operating at a level which is much lower than GSO, which is GSO, I told you 36,000 kilometers, NGSO can be at 500 kilometers, it can be 600, 1200. And why it is at a lower Earth orbit? Because if it is in the lower Earth orbit, it kind of, the distance between the terminal, which is located at the surface of the Earth, and the satellite is low, and therefore the latency is low, and therefore the experience is better. That is point number one. A second is that you can have multiple such satellites, right? Because when you are providing internet connectivity in a particular geography, you need to have large number of satellites, and that in order to create the capacity, the network capacity. For that, you need NGSO. And then there is another variant of NGSO, which is called MSS, which can do voice services. Because NGSO, which is Starlink is operating right now, which is the main theme of this presentation, is for broadband, but there could be another set of satellites which are doing voice services, and they operate at a different frequency, which is right in front of your screen. These are MSS, L and S band. If you look at this frequency band, these are lower frequency, and for the NGSO, for broadband services, you can see that these are higher frequency. So this is net without getting into further details, otherwise the whole presentation will become a 1 hour presentation. Now I will go to the page number. Let me just go to page number 151. And there we are going to talk about the summary of the recommendation. Now, summary of the recommendation is also pretty simple. You don't have to get confused with the recommendation. Let me just, I think my pen is again creating problem. So yeah, it is there still now. So what I want to tell you here is that satellite services in India, spectrum for satellite services in India, Government of India decided that it is not going to be auctioned. It is going to be given through an administrative mechanism. Now, when you give satellite service, a satellite spectrum through an administrative mechanism, you have to follow a certain criteria. Now, what is the criteria? Criteria is that if an application is made for a particular spectrum band, then you have to allow all the players to play in that spectrum band, because you can't give spectrum band exclusively for a satellite player. That's not the way it works. The same spectrum band is shared. So if you look at this recommendation, one is that it is saying that the satellite spectrum should not be auctioned. Second, that it is saying that the frequency band has to be shared. And then the third thing it is saying is that there are certain sharing rules which are laid out by ITU, which is between the GSO and NGSO. Those have to be followed. But between NGSO, the rules are not laid out, because there could be multiple NGSO satellite service providers. They can interfere with each other. So what it is saying is the government should prescribe a framework of sharing those NGSO operator who wants to operate within a particular spectrum band. So that is one thing. They did not spell out, the TRAI did not spell out the rules. They said that if there is a need, when the whole frequency band becomes too congested with many satellite service providers, because everybody has to be allowed to be, the Government of India, because it is not auctioning the spectrum, everybody should be allowed to operate. At that moment of time, the government may decide to come out with the sharing rules. So today it is not spelled out, right? Then the most important thing in this recommendation, by the way, friends, everything is, you can just ignore, is the AGR spectrum usage charge. Why it is important? Because normally when a spectrum is auctioned, the spectrum usage charge is zero. The Government of India came out in 2011 when they came out with the Telecom package. But since this is not auctioned, so there is a spectrum usage charge of 4% across all kinds of services, with a caveat. What is the caveat? If you recall, friends, just a few months back, Sunil Mittal came out with a new narrative that satellite services should have a level playing field between urban and in the urban area between the terrestrial services and the satellite services. Therefore, they should be given the same treatment, and the rural area, you can actually come out with a preferential treatment. That's what Sunil Mittal says. Now, here what they have done is they have tweaked the spectrum usage charge. They have made it uniform across all kinds of services at the rate of 4% of the revenue. But if you are operating in the urban area, you have to pay an additional 500 rupees per user at an additional charge for a year. For example, let's say if a service provider is operating in the urban area, one user, he pays SUC of 4% plus 500 rupees for that user. If he has 10 users, means 500 multiplied by 10 for an year. So that is the difference here. Rather than that, there is nothing else to be spoken about. Now, friends, I am going to go straight to the presentation and the business model for Starlink, because that is the most important thing that we should be looking into this, this presentation, because you need to know practically how Starlink is going to be impacted, because Starlink has the maximum number of satellites and they are the most important player in the Indian market, right? So in this presentation, we are going to do a projection analysis of Starlink business in India, we are going to measure the subscriber growth as well as the spectrum cost, and this is going to be linked directly mapped to the capacity constraint, because nothing is going to be speculated without taking into consideration the physical constraint under which satellite operators are working, right? So there are a lot of physical constraints. For example, number of satellites are limited, the launch has to be managed, you can't launch unlimited satellites, the frequency bands are limited, slots areas are limited. So there are many very, and the capacity per satellite is also limited on the basis of how much throughput it can support. Now, what I have done, friends, I have made an assumption. The assumption that I have made is, though it is different from what Starlink is projecting. Starlink is projecting 40,000 satellites, right, is the finality, right? But I have made an assumption that today Starlink is having around 5,500. They are claiming 7,000, but there are certain satellites which are getting retired. So I have taken 5,500. I may be wrong. It does not matter. It may be just wrong by maybe 1,000 satellite. Doesn't matter, right? But I have projected 12,000 satellite by 2036. This is what assumption I made, and viewers may correct me if I am wrong, if this projection is wrong. The another thing that I have made an assumption when I'm calculating business case for Starlink in India is that India is going to see 0.8% of the global constellation. Now, let me show you a website where Starlink projections, constellations are clearly visible. So if you go here, this is called Satellite Map Space. This is one of the most accurate, you can say website which shows Starlink, OneWeb, Kuniper, and GPS satellites. So I'm going to look at Starlink satellites, right? So you can see the Starlink satellites are all over the globe, right? These many satellites. And in India, over India, you can see the density of satellites. This is very poor. You can count. It may not be more than 40, maybe 30, right? Clearly, you can see that. I'll just zoom a little bit. And you see the number of satellites. These are live, right? Maybe with some delay, etc., right? So that is clearly visible. And if you compare with OneWeb, you can see that how, the density of OneWeb is so low compared to Starlink. And Kuniper is still lower and GPS is different, right? So let's go here. And what I am assuming is that of the all 5,500 satellites, 0.8% global constellation is going to be visible over India, which in the starting year of 2026 will be 44. And as you move forward in time, in 2036, it's going to be 96 satellites, right? So that is the assumption I have made. It may be wrong. You have to tweak it, right? I'm going to show you the Excel sheet where you can make this tweak, and the numbers are going to change. Each satellite assumed to be a realistic average throughput of 80 GBs. Now, friends, there are different versions of satellite with different capability. Now, I've taken an average number of 80 GBs. Some can code a little higher, some can code a little lower. So I'm taking the V2 mini, right? Its operational performance, from a theoretical operational performance is double that what I have taken. So I've taken an average practical number. So the total system capacity on the first year would be 3,520 Gbps, and it is going to scale to 7,680 Gbps. How it has been calculated? I'm going to show you the Excel sheet. So where is my Excel sheet? Let me just show you my Excel sheet. Oh my God, let me pause the video and I'll come back with my Excel sheet. So here is my Excel sheet, right? So if you look at this Excel sheet, and I'm going to keep on referring to this Excel sheet as we move forward. So what I have done, friends, I have put out all the assumptions here. You can pause the video and have a look at it, right? And then I have done the business case here, right? So the assumption is 80 Gbps here. And then these are the years, and this is the number of satellites, and this is the number of satellite which is projected over India. And then it is the total system capacity, and how it is calculated. Let me take my face here. It's very simple. If you see, multiply this by 80, and this is the number it comes. So it comes out to be 3,520 it goes to 7,680, right? So that's what I think you are with me, right? Now let's go to the next slide. Now, the second thing that we are interested to analyze when we are analyzing Starlink is that how many users are going to be active at a time. Because when you are configuring a system, you have to take into consideration active users, simultaneous active users. You cannot assume that all 100 users are active. Otherwise, you will configure a system which is going to be extremely which will have a very high overcapacity, and it's going to get wasted, because normally not all users are active at a time. So let's say if you design a system, then you can assume that the system is going to be used by only 20% of the user. That's what I have done right here. So on the basis of that, what I have done is you can calculate how many subscribers are possible because of this capacity. How I have done that? Because if you look at the 20% concentration factor and average download speed per subscriber, I am assumed to be 50 Mbps. Now friends, why I have taken average download speed for 50 Mbps? Because of this reason. So if you go to Starlink website, you will find that there is a range of 25 Mbps to 150 Mbps. I can't be sure that what should be the number. I've taken a number of 50 Mbps because that probably will be the average speeds which Indian users are going to see. You can change the numbers. If you can make it 75, the numbers are going to change. So based on that, you know the capacity. You don't have to use this column, by the way. It is not required. I'm going to tell you why, if I get time, why this column is important. You can get the total number of subscribers in India because of these constraints. 3.52 lakhs. 52 lakhs in the starting year, though it is not going to be that much, but you can support 3.52 lakhs in the starting year to, it can go up to 7.68 lakhs in the end of year. So it's not even crossing 1 million subscribers. And then I have made an urban to rural split of 50-50%. And why I'm doing urban to rural? Because the SUC charges are different from urban and different for rural, right? So on the basis of that, these calculations have been done. So let's go straight to that presentation again. I'll come back to the sheet again, depending upon the need, right? So if you see here, this constraint, the average subscriber session, 50 Mbps. So because of this constraint, I'm getting a subscriber of 3.25 lakhs in 2026 and 7.68 lakh in 2036, right? Split, I have assumed 50 to 50% urban, 50% rural. You can change the split depending upon what you think is appropriate. And the core subscriber cap reflects the system capacity, not the theoretical data capacity. Let me pause the video, friend. Just a minute. Give me a minute. Back. Actually, the light was a little poor. So, right. So, on why this is important, the theoretical data capacity is not the limit, because if you do the calculation here and if you pause the video and if you use this and if you calculate based on certain assumption on the number of subscriber, but multiplying the number of subscriber and the Mbps that they GB that they use, you will never be able to see that you will cross this limit. You will not cross this limit. This limit is set in certain markets so that the throughput of the user can be limited, because if user ends up using a certain bandwidth continuously for the whole month, then this capacity is going to get breached, the total system capacity. That's the whole purpose, right? So let's go to the next slide. Now, service pricing model. Now, I have assumed a single uniform service pricing model. It does not matter whether you're rural area, urban area, because satellites hanging in the sky, and it is not going to be so difficult to serve rural area and urban area because these systems are very easy to install. So starting ARPU I have set at 7,000 rupees per month, which is lower compared to what internationally what we see. And then I am tapering down this ARPU by 5% annually to, and I am at the age in the 10th year, it should come out to 4,275, right? So it is clear that since we are not crossing 1 million subscribers, Starlink is going to remain a niche product. It is never going to be scaled to a proportion of terrestrial FWA, right, or terrestrial broadband. Now comes to the licensing model. What is the license fee? License fee is based on the GMPS license of 8% AGR. SUC, you know that 4% AGR plus 500 rupees for the urban subscriber, which you are going to calculate and show you what the implications are. The total deduction, it comes out to be 12.3% of the revenue. And why? And if you include GST, it comes out to be 14.5%. And let's do the calculation and show you how it actually translates to 14.5% or 12.3%. Now, if you see here, friends, the urban SUC is different here. Why? Because if you look at the calculation, I have to take into factor this 500 rupees here, 500 rupees, right, per year per sub. And if you add that, it becomes slightly different from what you see in the rural SUC, which is a simple 4%. So if I click here and see, it's simple 4%, right? 4% here. So if you add this together and divide by the total revenue, whatever this urban and the rural revenue which is coming here, it comes out to be 4.31% across. So if you assume a 50% urban and rural split, you get an SUC of 4.3%, which means that 500 rupees implication increases the SUC by 0.3%. And I'm going to show you if you increase the urban thing by 80% and rural by 20%, this becomes 4.5. So there is not a very significant impact. Now, if I make it 20% urban and rural, then it is almost like 4.13, right? So let me make it 50%. So you get the point, right? So this is 4.3 plus 8%, it comes out to be 12.3, and plus GST, it comes out to be how much? It comes out to be 4.5%, right? So these assumptions reflect the current Indian regulatory norms, and on the basis of that, I've calculated. Now, the another important thing is, and this is important, this is going to be the culmination of this presentation, is that how much money Starlink is paying as regards SUC, and whether you can compare with the 26 gigahertz band auction, because 26 gigahertz band and these bands are similar in nature, right? So what I've done, friends, is I have calculated the total, NPV of SUC here, because I can add urban and the rural SUC based on the calculation which I've done. So this number comes out to be this, which I have, assuming a discount rate of 8%, because this was the last auction of 2024, this comes out to be 1416 for these many number of years. So this is the NPV, means 1,416 crore based on the subscriber numbers that I have assumed for Starlink. This is what the value that they are paying for a period of 11 years, right? So once you have this number, so what you can do is, that this actually 10 years, right? So what Starlink will get, how much spectrum? It will get spectrum of around 2 gigahertz. Let's go to that particular presentation of TRAI recommendation, page number 51. Go to page number 51. So go to page 51. So I go to page 51. So when I go to page 51, you will see that this is going to be the downlink, which is roughly 2 gigahertz, and this is the uplink, so 2.5 gigahertz band, right? So if you have 2.5 gigahertz total, right? So if you have 2.5 gigahertz total, so what does it mean? It basically means that if Jio paid 7,000 crores for 1 gigahertz of 26 gigahertz band. So if you calculate this on the basis of this 2.5, so how do I calculate? Let me show you. 1416 multiplied by 2 for 20 years, right? This is what the calculation is. And then this comes out to be 2832. 2832 is the total amount. And then what you're doing, you divide it by 2.5. So per gigahertz comes out to be 1132, means 1 gigahertz. But Starlink paid, what Reliance Jio paid around 7,000 crores. So 1,000 crores, you can assume this. So this comes out to be 7 times cheaper per megahertz than compared to 26 gigahertz band. I think you probably got it, right? Because I'm comparing with Jio. So Jio paid 7,000 crores for 1 gigahertz, and their number would be how much? Their number would be 1132 crores per megahertz, right? So per gigahertz, right? So that's why it translates into a 7% cheaper, even though the SUC has been put as 4%. So you got the point, overall thing. Now, key finding is that the revised subscriber base projection we have calculated, not revised, the subscriber projection is less than 1 million. And then the SUC is around 4.3% of the revenue, assuming 50% and 50% urban split. And the NPV value is 1,416 for Starlink for a period of 10 years, which translates into if the spectrum was exclusively auctioned, then there is a saving of around 1:7, right? So 7 times cheaper compared to that. So even 4% number was put, it does not really materially change anything, right? It's almost marginal. So SUC really is not an impact. So conclusion is that based on the capacity constraint which I showed you, the number of satellites and the per satellites, ability to drive certain GB, Starlink in India will always be less than 1 million subscribers. It will never cross that number. And therefore, Starlink ability to price at a very niche level, at a very low level, is going to be very constrained, because if you cannot drive volumes, then you will never be able to price your services very cheap. You will always like to price your services high, because then the product of lower volume into higher price translates into a greater revenue, right? So future capacity growth hinges on next generation satellite. So current visibility, whatever I showed you, is based on the current visibility that I have. But if there's something drastically different happens in future, when the satellite capacity increases tremendously, these numbers may change. So friends, just to summarize, TRAI came out with the recommendation. The key part of the recommendation is that spectrum is going to be given without auction. The SUC charges are 4% across all board, except those NGSO services which are deployed in, or the broadband services which are deployed in the urban area, where 500 rupees per terminal extra, which translates into a hardly 30 basis point increase if you assume a 50% split. And then if you take a business model of Starlink, you will notice that if you do an NPV calculation on their SUC outflow, it is 1/7 or 1/6 or 1/7. What was the number? So it is 1/7 cheaper compared to what the operators paid for 26 gigahertz band, though it is an exclusive spectrum, right? And Starlink capacity is limited by the total number of satellites which are going to be visible on the surface of the Earth or surface of India, and that number kind of makes their overall growth less than 1 million subscriber, even if we are going to go to 10 years from now. So that is net friends about this presentation. 25 minutes have passed. I hope that you like this video. And if you have any suggestion or any kind of feedback, let me know in the comment section. I'll come back with a new video or a new topic next time. Thank you very much for listening.